Hello again, I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And hello again, I'm still Chuck Jubin.
I should have added that part. I'm still
Yeah,
Kelvin
right,
Thompson,
right, right.
not
We
not
endure.
anybody else.
Calvin, we endure.
How are you doing today, Chuck?
Oh, I'm doing okay, just fine. Uh, been thinking a lot about our conversations, and quality and thinking more, and you've stimulated me as usual, Calvin. So I'm very interested to see where we go in the second session.
Yeah, I'll quote Chuck Jubin to you. I can't wait to see what we're going to say.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes,
For,
indeed.
as I think may become our mantra a little bit, the two of us have been talking about quality well nigh unto 20 plus years now. And so we thought if we actually get on camera and microphone together and maybe make this shareable and invite some other folks into it, maybe it'll help us more easily find a finish line or a stopping point or a jumping off point or something.
At least a point.
At
I
least
can't.
a point.
I was so interested. I reviewed our last presentation, and you look at yourself and you say, "Oh my God, I don't believe I said that." What am I doing by saying that? But I did notice that a full 11 people watched our recording.
Hey, that could have been me 11 times.
Yeah, it could have been, but then I noticed, the bad news is we didn't get any thumbs up. The good news is we didn't get any thumbs down.
Yeah.
So on average, I guess we're okay.
I mean, that in and of itself is worthy of comment, right? I mean, everybody, be wary when people start talking about everybody.
Right.
Um, but so many of us look for affirmation, right? And when it comes to quality and in a teaching and learning context, especially, right? Uh, whether it's the end of term evaluations or whether it's what does rate my professor say or what do students tell us, we look for affirmations. We look for the thumbs up and we dread the thumbs down.
Oh, absolutely. It's time and time again where, I've said many, many times that, in your class, everybody but one says you were excellent and one says you were terrible. And what do you obsess on? You that one negative kind of comment. And, we've done work here asking faculty to share with us the one comment that stayed with them their entire teaching career. And they all had them, and I'll share my personal one. You've heard it before.
Yeah.
Someone wrote, Chuck Jubin is a very smart man. He may even be as smart as he thinks he is, and I think that is so telling about maybe my persona in that class. I mean, it's a very interesting kind of thing. It is the street data that is so important in this kind of thing, right? I don't know. And my favorite on Rate My Professor always has been, this guy is so boring, my pillow needs a pillow. And you just have to love it. You just have to love it. You do.
I think that comment, right, that we maybe as humans, uh, we tend toward many of us, most of us, amplifying artificially the negative.
Right.
I mean, that says something. I mean, it says some things maybe in search of therapeutic talk treatment. I don't know, but
Right.
it does say something about the fact. I'm reminded when you said that again. I was thinking of our shared colleague, Dr. Steve Sorg, and I remember Steve saying once that and I can't exactly remember the context, but I have this feeling it was probably about some sort of course design and teaching, you know,
Right.
context. And Steve, wise as always, said, well, I find it helpful to remember that nobody comes to work in the morning and says, let me try to do a bad job.
Right. Right. Yeah,
You know,
we all
just
do
that
that.
assuming positive intent. I mean, we're all trying to find to do a good thing, which is maybe partly why we obsess about the negative.
Oh, it is just the human condition, I think. Calvin, as we do these, I hope there will be other people who will help us, help us think about this notion of quality. Certainly, as we said in our last session, you and I have been thinking about it a long time, but we have resources, and I would love to get ideas, and I would love to get input from people in other professional venues in terms of what their thinking is about this notion of quality. And I was thinking about you, we have a lot of things to share. You know, we talked last time about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. It
Mhm.
is true that that book was turned down, rejected 121 times. One of the icons of American philosophy, and no one really would, I think, detract from its quality, but 121 times. J.K. Rowling was rejected 12 times, with her Harry Potter. C.S. Lewis, in the Chronicles of Narnia was rejected incalculable number of times before he got it published. So there is that component of this quality thing, that's sense of rejection, or what you just talked about, the obsession on a negative comment. I don't know where we'll go with this, but it's an interesting phenomenon. And the other thing that you mentioned last time that I hope we can pursue a little more is this notion of metaphors. You mentioned the whole metaphor notion. What is the metaphor for quality? Certainly, we have metaphors everywhere. You know, look at the internet, the cloud, the Trojan horse, the virus, the Internet of Things. It goes on and on. The whole conversation in technology is nothing but one long metaphor. And what is a metaphor? It is trying to cast something you don't understand in terms of something you do understand. So we have metaphors for everything in a great book. And I will mention now that available through these series through Kelvin and Chuck are the Chuck notes for any
That's
number of
right.
books. And one of them is the great Lakoff and Johnson book, Metaphors We Live By. It's insightful. It is inspiring. And there are all kinds of metaphors. And I'm shuffling papers here, Calvin, because I'm trying to get ready for this. But in that book, time is a moving object. Rational argument is war. You know, understanding is seen. Um, Ideas are food, you know, the mind is a container. The whole notion of looking at something in terms of its um, metaphorical definition. There are metaphors for analytics. There's all kinds of metaphors for technology. And I did some searches for metaphors for quality in our generative AI friends, and it was singularly disappointing. Singularly disappointing in terms of uh, you're not feeling the music here, you know. No.
Can I springboard off of that
Yeah, please,
comment
man.
about metaphors? Um, I don't know if this is true or not. I just ran across this anecdote on a podcast about Van Gogh, and in particular, the famous painting Starry Night.
Yes,
And the here's a metaphor for you. You talked about kind of the diarist nature, which put me into kind of this logging of moments, as if that just the transcription of something is a kind of quality. So in some of his letters, this person on this podcast said that Van Gogh was fascinated with the newish technology of the camera and the photograph.
yes,
But and some might have said during the late 1800s that, well, that is a superior product. The quality, the output quality of the camera is superior to what the artist with a canvas and a paintbrush might depict, right? Because you go, oh, look. And I've even heard people say this. I may have said this before. You're at an art show or something. And you're like, oh, that's an outstanding painting. It looks just like a photograph,
yeah,
as if the photograph is the the gold standard of quality, the representation of reality, the closest, the accuracy of what one sees. But all of that is a construct, right? And I mean, there's a lot we could talk about with that, about our perceptions of reality. But this person on the podcast said something that was just fascinating to me. If we've all seen Starry Night, right? It's this vibrant dark night sky, but all these almost in motion, radiating points of light and energy and excitement and other sparkles of color that I haven't looked up at the night sky and have seen. But what Van Gogh is doing is not just bringing kind of a photographic realism, but is bringing emotion and depicting that with pigment and paintbrush. So which one is the superior quality? Which one is the better representation of the object, the photograph, or Van Gogh's depiction, right? So there's a metaphor for you.
There's a metaphor, and that's fascinating monologue, Kelvin, because
I got nothing but fascinating monologues, Chuck.
Yeah, I know we are nothing but. But when you look at Starry Night, you're looking at a static painting that has motion, and there's an emotional component to it, because not only are you looking at it visually, you're feeling something. Many times art triggers some sort of an emotional response. And you go to the Louvre and you look at Mona Lisa, which is a relatively small painting. When you go look at it, you say, that is so small for being such an icon in the world. And you see people looking at it, and it is this an ephemeral, are we talking about this quality thing that is a continual moving object? Are we into quantum mechanics, where quality is both a wave and a particle? And it can be either one simultaneously, and it doesn't become either one until you look at it. It's fascinating to me in the fact that quantum mechanics has nothing to do with our daily lives, but it is the foundation of the universe. I mean, as we delve into these, and I'll say again, all of these things that we talk about, like when we talked about Persig and quality, there are notes available through us. You can have notes on any of these books if you'd like them. And what I prefer, you would prefer too, I prefer that that you request the notes, and we'd be glad to send them to them. We prefer that they not be training models for AI.
Yeah, right. There you go. I'm gonna push us both a little bit,
Go for it.
though, Chuck, on I think all of that, right? I mean, I've sometimes said in talks that quality is ineffable, right? It's hard to capture, right? And you've talked about like quantum mechanics and so forth. And yet, not unlike the instructor who's just trying to do the best, it is haunted by the negative comment and is bolstered by the positive comments. There are our personal intersections, the things that we pursue, in search of quality in our work, the things that we use to gauge whether anybody thought we did a good job or not. That's the practical realities. I told you before we hit record that I was in a kind of a online program vetting discussion kind of meeting earlier today, and it was very collegial and so forth. But we spoke together about like our team here, we want to be partners in quality with the faculty in the academic unit, right? And there's some things that we know about what can make a more valuable online learning experience. We've been doing this for a few decades. There's things that we know, and people shouldn't have to like reinvent the wheel. So is that quality? What are these inputs that help make more likely a better experience? And better according to whom? Better for whom? The learner experience I tend to focus on. Are you more likely to have a successful learning experience? Are you more likely to learn? Are you more likely to get a good grade? I mean, what is good? Can we talk about that? Practical intersections.
Practical intersections. I love, again, your monologue.
Got nothing but monologue.
I love it, Kelvin.
I must have learned this from you, Chuck.
So in that, where is quality located? Do we need to have external validation to know that something is quality? Is it out there? Is what we do evolving toward quality only if the external world says to us that is quality? That's a fascinating topic to me in terms of, can it exist in my head, or do I have to have validation? I have worked with an editor who is so perfect with her editorial and grammar skills, and the manuscript is perfectly grammatically correct, and she has systematically sucked the voice out of it. Do you know what I'm saying, Kelvin? It is so technically correct and sterile that Jack Kerouac would roll over in his grave if he saw that manuscript. And it's like, I remember roughly, if I've got this right, Hemingway said something like, you've got to be in good shape and have a good counterpunch, because when the stuff comes crazy and goes alive on you, you've got to fight to the bitter end. And it's this sort of struggle with this striving for quality. And all of these people that we mentioned this morning, who are revered historically as quality, live tortured lives. Van Gogh, Hemingway, many people struggled with this. And some of the greatest artists like Picasso and Salvatore Dali, I mean, struggled with life. Salvatore Dali, the only difference between crazy people and me is I'm not crazy. Yeah, and that's way above my league in terms of what I'm doing. And you and I know, no manuscript is ever complete. It's abandoned.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that is instructive in a way, right? I mean, I think I'm fascinated by that question of yours about, does it live out there?
Yeah.
And that example of an editor, right? You maybe check more boxes on some list of Strunk and White's form and style
Right.
sheet, but did you lose your voice? And those artistic examples, maybe some of what they had in common is there was some degree of belief and some degree of compulsion to give voice, to what was inside, no matter what somebody else was looking for. But it's not like, that Van Gogh, you might occasionally hear somebody, maybe more so with Picasso, but you might hear somebody saying, like, that's famous. I mean, goodness, I could have splashed some paint on canvas and come up with something like that. But Van Gogh worked hard and studied deeply to get to the form of expression toward the end of his career, right? And I think the same is true of writers and so forth. It's not just because they don't match some kind of rules. You mentioned Berliner's expertise stages, right? The breaking the rule, the not breaking the rule. It's not just because they break the rule, they're good. There's something in this authorial ownership of voice, in addition to knowing what the rules are. in many cases, and choosing maybe to break them. I wonder about that, if that's part of it.
You know, Calvin, in that Berliner hierarchy, when he talks about that, when he talks about the true expert, that they're irrational, you know, and he really defines two kinds of experts, those who can tell you what they do and those who cannot. And what was it? Feldman, I think in Virginia, wrote some papers about how experts, true experts, are terrible teachers because they skip rules, and they give misinformation, and they don't do the pedagogical kinds of things that we teach. Um, and I've seen this, and I've seen true experts like nurses, for instance. True expert nurses say, well, everything's in the green with this patient, but they're going to go bad in an hour. And they're right. Or nuclear power plant operators say, everything is nominal, but the plant's going to go bad in 2 hours. And how do they know? How do they know this? It's always fascinated me about expertise and how they operate and what they do. And somehow there is a relation to quality there. But again, from our last thing, I just can't put my finger on it.
And that might be something to pick back up another time. Like, I hear when you say that, I hear I hear intuition, and maybe there's an understanding that is synergistic beyond the immediate conscious perception, right? That maybe that's part of what expertise is a synergistic, holistic understanding that you can't put your finger on, but yeah, I can't. This is going to go bad.
Yeah,
Well, listen to that person.
yeah.
Listen. Maybe that's
And
worth picking up.
and we've done this, when we worked together at UCF. Somehow we went into classrooms, and we looked at phenomenal teachers. You remember that. They were mind-bending in terms of their skill and their flow, and all of what they did. And we looked at it, and then we would come away and say, well, let's write this down. And it's difficult. It was very, very difficult. You know,
Hmm.
I'm I don't know. I don't know, Chuck. One of these conversations I hope we can have is about how far down this quality hole can we go before the granularity loses our definition. Um, can we get too granular in this whole quality thing? I don't know. I don't know. But again, I hope our audience will help us with this.
I think there's a sweet spot in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You can be so broad that you don't know what you're talking about, and it's just a catch-all, and you can be so precise that it doesn't cohere, and
Right.
it doesn't make sense. But it occurs to me that probably folks are about reaching their limit on listening to us for this session. I wonder, we talked about this before hitting record. A
It's me, Calvin. No one is tired of listening to you. It's just me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, Another Jubinism that I've heard you speak about before, and I wonder if you might, by way of kind of wrap up, say some words about this. When we've talked about quality before, you've sometimes cited what you have called the Anna Karenina principle. You want to unpack that a little bit?
I would be happy to. Um, I always, when I did IDL, the training for our faculty about research in this area, and that's another thing that I hope we can have a conversation about. How can we leverage quality into the scholarship of teaching and learning? I would love to pursue that conversation. But I've always asked my faculty, uh, what is the opening line of Anna Karenina, the great Tolstoy novel? And it is, all happy families are alike. Unhappy families are unhappy in their own unique ways. And the question I always ask then is, what did Tolstoy mean by that? And here's what he meant by that. If a family is happy, they have generally resolved most of the issues that would come between a happy marriage, would derail it. Money, sex, intellectual capacity, leisure time, in-laws, the list goes on and on and on. And what he was meaning by that is happy families have generally resolved all of those potential issues. Unhappy families are unhappy in their own unique ways. Tolstoy was implying that any one of them could derail a marriage. You know, you could do them all, but if you didn't do them all, any one thing could tank your marriage. In-laws, money, sex, any one of them could do it. That's the Anna Karenina principle, and it has been used everywhere. Science, physics, mathematics, plate tectonics, medicine, you know, take medicine. What do you have to do to diagnose a patient? You have to do all of these things. One of them will cause a misdiagnosis. And Jared Diamond, in his fascinating book, Germs, Guns, and Steel, mind-blowing book. You can have the Chuck notes. If you get in touch with Kelvin, you can have the Chuck notes on Germs, Guns, and Steel. But in there, he defined one of the defining characteristics of how cultures progressed in the world. And one of the ways cultures progressed was through the domestication of animals. That is clearly one of the ways. And interestingly enough, of 40 to 140 some odd mammals, a very few, 7 or 8, have been actually domesticated. Goats, cows, horses, many have been tamed, but very few have been domesticated. And he said that is critical to a culture forming for food, for everything else. And he had his Anna Karenina list of what it takes to domesticate an animal. And I'm going to read it to you. Excuse me, audience, but I'll read it to you. 1, they must grow quickly. 2, they must breed in captivity. 3, they must not have a nasty disposition. 4, they must not be susceptible to panicking in captivity. They must be able to live in herds. They must have a dominance hierarchy and be able to imprint on man, and they may not be overly territorial. His take on this was that in order for an animal to be domesticated, all of these things must be met. And when you think about it, he's right. He's right. And these are very broad principles. They're very broad. But for instance, zebras would be an excellent source of protein. What's the problem? They're so nasty, you can't deal with them. Polar bears would be a good source of protein. It's the imprint on man thing that is a problem with them. Thompson's gazelles would be an excellent sense of protein, but they freak out in captivity. That's the Anna Karenina principle. We've got these general categories. They're all necessary. Can we transfer that to quality? Can we take the Anna Karenina principle and find 5, 6, 8, 4 principles that apply to this and subscribe to them? I don't know, but I hope our audience can help us with it.
That's good, Chuck. That's good. And I think especially just to bring further focus, there's the sort of the broad conceptual topic of quote unquote quality, and then there's the bringing a little focus to, in particular, in our higher education context, and in particular to what we might call online and digital teaching and learning, right? Your same question applies. You know, can you get to a handful of principles that without which you don't have quality? You have something, but you don't have quality. I don't know. I don't know if we can get there.
Calvin, that's brilliant. You know, what is quality in the universe? What is quality in our solar system? Is it the same? And is it the same at UCF and the University of Louisville? That's a fascinating topic. God, you're really on today.
You're so kind. Well, you know, if you're watching this, listening to this, reading the transcript, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to
Yes.
connect with you. Chuck will send you Chuck notes.
Yeah,
I might buy you a cup of coffee, but we'd love to just interact around this. Or, I mean, we enjoy talking to each other,
we do.
but we're pro, even if we don't know exactly what it is, we're pro quality. We really want to see things improve, not what's the opposite of improve? Degrade, fall apart.
Oh, no, that's
There's a
that's one of Lakoff's great metaphors. Up is good, down is bad. It's always the
yes,
way. Nobody goes down to heaven.
that's right. That's right. And on that note, maybe we'll just point out that we're never really done considering quality, but we
Right.
do hope to get to a more practical pausing point over time in these conversations in order to help guide practice in higher education and particularly with digital education. Um, I'm going to say bye for now. What are you going to say, Chuck?
I am still Chuck Jubin. Thank you, everyone.